So hi everybody. This is our second class of the Shabbat Nusach at the Amud. And last week we discussed the Psukei de Zimra and Shacharit Nusach, i.e. the Shema and its blessings, all the way up to the Amidah. What I would like to do today is to continue from that point. What I mean is, I want to take the Nusach for the Amidah for Shabbat. What I'm going to do is the Amidah for both Shacharit and Musaf. Okay, there are like little changes here and there. Obviously, there are changes in the text, but the Nusach itself is almost identical. It changes a little bit when it comes to the Kedusha, but we'll get there. And then I would like to continue with taking out the Torah and the beginning of Musaf and the end of Musaf if we have time for all that stuff. Okay, so I'm looking at the Amidah, repetition of the Amidah for Shacharit, for Shabbat. So just kind of a little recap. We were in that, right? That Nusach, and then we etc., etc., etc. It's kind of a motif that we would like to incorporate. לשמך ושפת הים יחד כולם הטובים לכו ואמרו עד השם ימלוך לעולם ועד. And the conclusion of that redemption, the bracha of redemption of the Geula, Baruch atah Hashem ka'al Yisrael tarararam. That's the Jewish mode, right? The Hava Nagila one. Okay, so now we're going to obviously there's going to be a silent Amidah, and after the Amidah there's going to be a repetition of the Amidah. And here we actually changed the Nusach. We go into, it's not a really major Nusach. Major is think about happy birthday. Right? It's not exactly that, but it's somewhat. It's actually, I don't want to go into too much of a terminology. It's the Mixolydian scale. Okay. Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu v'Elokei Avoteinu Elokei Avraham Elokei Yitzchak v'Elokei Yaakov Ha'el HaGadol HaGivor v'Hanora El Elyon גומל חסדים טובים וקונה הכל, וזוכר חסדי אבות, ומביא גואל לבני בניהם, למען שמו באהבה. And here's a motif, מלך עוזר, ומושיע ומגן, ברוך אתה השם, מגן אברהם. Okay, so we have that Nusach. Pa 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 pa. Then we go to the next bracha. Ata gibor leolam ad Hashem mechayem et imata rab leoshia. It's applicable. Mashiva ruach morid geshem. Here many congregations have the custom of singing something. Mechalkel chayim bechesed, or whatever congregation singing that you want. That works with the Nusach is fine with me. Mechalkel chayim mechalkel chayim. Doesn't matter. There's no shortage of melodies. But in case you don't want to do melody and you want to stick with a simple Nusach, mechalkel chayim bechesed mechayem etim berachamim rabim somech noflim berofech cholim umatir asurim umekayem emunato lishnei afar. Many times I hear people say lishnei afar. Okay, it's very wrong because Lishenei, it's a short form of yeshenei. Comes from the word yashen, to sleep. Those who sleep in afar, ground. Okay. Who those who sleep in the ground? Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. So when we say umekayem emunato lishenei afar, right? God fulfill his promise, which is called here emunah, which is very interesting by itself, because they believed in him, right? Emunah, lishenei afar. The wrong way, which unfortunately I hear it very often, is lishenei afar. Shenei comes from the word two. So which two are they? Abraham and Isaac, not Jacob, or any other two. So be careful. Lishenei afar, lishnei afar. Okay. Mi chamocha bal gefurot. Here also, the word is not, the word actually is dome, but we're going to say dome. And if you look at the art scroll also in the Kohen, there's a meteg, there's a little vertical line under the dalid that tells you that the accent is going to be on the dalid. Dome lach. Why is that? It's a rule in the grammar. We spoke about that before. It's called nasog le'achor, and because dome lach are connected or relate to each other, it's dome lach. Melech memit umechaye. I like personally to put them together. Melech memit umechaye, or melech memit umechaye, but it's not melech memit. I mean, right? It's a king. Melech memit umechaye. It's not melech memit. It's not a king that put to death and only then remembers and revives. It's a king, has the ability to put to death and to revive. Melech memit umechaye umatzmiach Yeshua v'ne'eman ata la'chayot metim baruch ata Adoshem. And here it's interesting. We have a difference between Shacharit and Musaf. In Shacharit, we need to do what we call the Regish Nusach. Mechaye hametim tararara tirarara. It's actually a minor Nusach. I'm sorry, it's not a Regish Nusach. Why? Because the Kedusha starts with a minor. Right? Versus Musaf, the Musaf, Baruch atah Adoshem mechayeh hametim. We stay in that Mixolydian major like key. Why? Because the Kedusha over there is going to be in the major key as well. Okay, so make a note of that if possible. Okay, that's the minor. Baruch atah Adoshem mechayeh hametim. And then we're going to go into Kedusha. Nekadesh et shimcha ba'olam keshem shemagdishim oto b'shemei marom. ככתוב על יד נביאך, וקרא זה לזה, ואמר. Now, a lot of congregations, a lot of places, they do congregation singing. I'm going to stick with a simple nusach, especially with mimkomcha. Many congregations here in America would do a congregation singing. If you want to do that, by all means, you're not limited. Try to find a melody that is in the minor key. It's really not difficult. Well, most of the Jewish melodies are in the minor key. Okay, but you come, you do out loud, you start from as. Now, this is also very important. Many times what I hear is people do as bekol, and then Rash Gadol, etc. Okay, that's not so great. Why? Because it makes no sense in terms of the phrasing of the phrasing. What we need to do is as, then bekol Rash Gadol, Adir v'Chazak, mashmiim kol. In that great sound, great voice. Okay, so I try to make a point of that. As, it's not as bekol, it's not. As bekol Rash Gadol, Adir v'Chazak, mashmiim kol. Now, if you can do it as one phrase, it's even better. As bekol Rash Gadol, Adir v'Chazak, mashmiim kol. מתנשאים לעומת צרפים, לעומתם, ברוך יאמרו. And here we come to the Mimkomcha. As I said, most places will do congregation singing. I'm just going to give it a simple nusach. ממקומך מלכנו תופיע, ותמלוך עלינו, כי מחכים אנחנו לך. מתי תמלוך בציון? בקרוב בימינו לעולם ועד תשכון. תתגדל ותתקדש. By the way, there are different versions. תתגדל or תתגדל. תתגדל ותתקדש בתוך ירושלים עירך לדור ודור ולנצח נצחים. Now I make a point, if we do a nusach, to go back to that motif that we had in Shachet. Ta-ra-ra-ra-ra. ועינינו תראינה מלכותך, כדבר אמור בשירי יוסיך, על ידי דוד משיח צדקך. In the ending, ימלוך על השם לעולם, אלוהי ציון, לדור ודור, hallelujah. If you noticed, we moved from Nekadesh et Shimcha ba'olam, from the minor, to the Fragish one as in Shacharit, right? Tador vador ulenetzach netzachim yimloch al Hashem leolam Elohai Tzion ledor vador hallelujah ledor vador nagid godlecha ulenetzach netzachim kiddushatcha nagdish v'shivchacha Eloheinu. Here, by the way, there are different versions. Some people say ushvachacha. Both of them are correct. It depends on your tradition and what's the custom of the shul. V'shivchacha Eloheinu mipinu leyamush leolam va'ed yel melech gadol v'kadosh ata. Pay attention. There's a metek under the aleph. Okay, it's an end of a sentence, so it's similar to the rule that we have in Torah reading, what we call tzurat hefsek, and therefore ata, the word ata becomes ata. Okay, different other forms of that rule is when a regel becomes ragel, gedi becomes gedi, etc., etc., etc. We spoke about that in the context of the Torah reading. Okay. כי אל מלך גדול וקדוש, אתה ברוך, אתה השם, האל הקדוש. Now this is very important because the Chatima, Baruch, אתה השם, or Baruch, אתה השם, it's the same thing, האל הקדוש. That formula is going to be every time in the Chatima. So it's going to be for the end of the next bracha, and also for the last three brachot, Retzeh, Modim, and Shalom. Okay, I'm going to go right into the Kedushat Hayom, the holiness of the day, continuing with the repetition. for Shacharit. Shacharit specifically starts with the word Yismach Moshe v'matnat cheko. We spoke about that last time. The difference in Kedushat Hayom, why the middle bracha changes on Shabbat, but it does not change on the Regalim or even on Rosh Hashanah. And we said it's because the nature of the day, only the day of Shabbat, changes, and that bracha needs to reflect the changes of the day. We mentioned the Abu Raham's idea of the wedding and the different stages of the wedding. And okay. So we start with Yismach Moshe here. Yismach Moshe b'matnat chelko, ki eved ne'eman karata lo. That's the phrase that we already playing with that for a long time. Kli tiferet berosho natata lo, be'omdo. Be careful, omdo. Okay, it's a kamatz katan, right? That means, we mentioned that before, the kamatz has an O sound. Be'omdo, it's not be'amdo. Be'omdo lefanecha al har Sinai. Ushnei luchot avanim horid beyado. Also a common mistake. Ushnei luchot avanim horid beyado. That's wrong, because it says in 2 tablets, and then stones he had in his hand. It's not. Ushnei luchot avanim. The tablets were made out of stone. ושני לוחות אבנים הוריד בידו, וכתוב בהם שמירת שבת, וכן כתוב בתורתך. Now, it's an interesting, tiny thing. If you want to do something, you can do. I like to do it sometimes. Is to sing here the beginning melody of Shalom Aleichem. ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת, לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם. Gives a context, Shalom Aleichem, a lot of people know it. It's, it's a nice melody and it fits perfectly with the Nusach. But if you don't want to do that, ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת, לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם, ביני ובין בני ישראל אותי לעולם, כי 6 ימים עשה אדונם את השמיים ואת הארץ, וביום השביעי שבת ויהי נפש. ולא נתתו השם אלוקינו לגויי הארצות, ולא הנחלתו מלכנו לעובדי פסילים, וגם במנוחתו לא ישכנו ערלים. You hear that melody? Da 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 di 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 da da ba 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 la da 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 di 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 da 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 di 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 da 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 da. So basically, it's 3 phrases, while the first phrase has kind of a variation on that. So the first is da 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 di di da da da, variation. Ba 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 da 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 da. Second phrase. Da 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 da. Third, da 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 da, pa 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 pa. That's it. That's the whole nusach. Da 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 da, da 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 da, pa 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 pa. Okay, and you can play with that. ולא נתתו השם אלוקינו לגויי הארצות, ולא הנחלתו מלכנו לעובדי פסילים. So I did one variation of one. וגם במנוחתו לא ישכנו ערלים. That's the 2. כי לישראל עמך נתתו באהבה. That's again 2. לזרע יעקב אשר בם בחרת. That's the 3. Make sure that you do a 3 at the end of a sentence. Now you can go back to 1, you can go back to 2, you can go the variation of the 2, of the 1. I went to the variation of the 1. That's the 2. That's 1. Again 1. Zecher Lemase Bereshit. That's a 3. Here, many has a custom of doing, like a practice of doing, like kind of a semi-congregation singing. Eloheinu v'Elokei avoteinu retzeh v'mnuchateinu chadshenu b'mitzvotecha. One of the things that drives me crazy in that one is chadshenu b'mitzvotecha. It's just wrong Hebrew. The word is not b'mitzvotecha, b'mitzvotecha. Right? There's a meteg under the taf. So if you can fix it, that's great. If you can't, I would avoid that melody. Kadeshenu b'mitzvotecha v'ten chelkeinu b'toratecha sabeinu mituvecha v'samecheinu b'shuatecha. Okay, it might throw off some people that are used to Kadeshenu b'mitzvotecha v'ten chelkeinu b'toratecha. These are all wrong because the syllable, the accent doesn't fall on the right syllable. Okay, v'taher libeinu. The word is not v'taher, but v'taher. V'taher libeinu. And here, pay attention also. It's le'ovdecha. It's a kamatz katan again. It's a o sound. It's not le'avdecha. Now, if I'm not going to do that with that melody, Eloheinu v'Elokei avoteinu retzeh v'mnuchateinu chadeshenu b'mitzvotecha v'tenchakenu b'toratecha sabeinu mitovecha v'samchenu b'shuatecha v'taher libeinu lovdecha b'emet. Go back to that motif. V'ancheleinu parararara v'ancheleinu Hashem Elokeinu be'ahava v'ratzon Shabbat kodshecha v'yanuchu vo Yisrael mekadeshei shemecha baruch atah Adoshem or baruch atah Adoshem. It's the same thing. Mekadesh Shabbat or Mekadesh Shabbat in the most simple way. Okay, let's continue. Retzeh Adoshem Elokeinu Amcha Yisrael b'tfilatam or Retzeh Adoshem Elokeinu be'amcha Yisrael b'tfilatam ve'hashev et ha'avodah lidivir beitecha v'shei Yisrael ותפילתם באהבה תקבל ברצון, ותהי לרצון תמיד עבודת ישראל עמך. ותחזינה עינינו, I'm back in that motif, תיררררה, ושובך לציון ברחמים, ברוך אתה אדושם. המחזה שכינתו לציון, אור המחזה שכינתו לציון. Now we come to the modim. It's an ancient issue with what exactly the Chazan do. Now the correct way, and that's the way it appears in every halacha book, is that the Chazan need to read the entire modim. Okay, the entire modim while the congregation reads the modim de Rabbanan. I know that there are certain practices where you wait. If you look at the Mishnah Berurah, it's very clear about that you do not wait for the congregation. I know some of the practices, like for example, Rabbi Maskin in Young Israel Century City asked the Chazan to start modim or modim anachnu lach, something like that, and then wait, and then continue when the congregation ends. Ask the rabbi what is the custom. I can tell you that the practice here at Beth Jacob is that we do it simultaneously at the same time. The Chazan recite out loud the entire paragraph of modim, while the congregation recites the paragraph of modim de Rabbanan. Okay. Now, there's an old practice that is wrong, where the Chazan just say, Modim anachnu lach, and then silently or an undertone reads the entire paragraph and just end it. Or just end it. That's wrong. It's wrong. I understand where it comes from. It comes from that idea of we don't want to create too much of a balagan, that it's difficult to hear the chazan, right? If I'm reading a different text. And it's also going to be very difficult for me to recite that text if I'm listening to the chazan. So basically, the practice in some places has become that the chazan will do it in an undertone. However, in all the halacha books, if you look at the Mishnah Berurah and everybody else probably, it's very clear that the chazan needs to recite the entire paragraph out loud. It's a bracha, just like the other brachot of the Amidah. Okay? So, modim anachnu lach. And here the word is sha. It's not she, it's sha. Sha'atahu. There's a kamatz there. The reason why we do that, it's because in Tanakh, the word ata or sha'ata is always with a kamatz. It's not she'ata, that's modern Hebrew, but in Tanakh we're going to find it with a kamatz, sha'ata. Okay? And when it was, when the tefillot were composed by, whether it was Shmuel HaKatan or whether it was Anshe Knesset HaGdolah, it really doesn't matter. There's a debate in the Talmud about that. They decided to use the practice from Tanakh. Okay? So, sha'ata. Modim anachnu lach. Sha'ata hu Ad Hashem Elokeinu v'Elokei Avoteinu le'olam va'ed. Kur chayeinu magen isheinu. Atahu ledor v'dor. You got to understand also that here there are different practices when it comes to how to read that paragraph. Okay, magen ishenu atahu period or atahu ledor v'dor. So if ledor v'dor is going to be in the next sentence, so magen ishenu atahu and then ledor v'dor nodeh lecha u'saper tilatecha. Just check the siddur. Make sure that you do whatever the congregation, the custom of the congregation is. If you have any doubt, you can always ask the rabbi. But I'm pretty sure that most places would have a siddur that has punctuation. Just follow the punctuation. So this is, for example, the art scroll, what I'm using here. So it's atahu ledor v'dor, period. So tzur chayenu magen ishenu. Atahu ledor v'dor, period. Nodeh lecha. I'm starting again on one, right? Remember, one. Unsaper tilatecha. Variation on one, 1A, let's call it. Al chayenu amsurim beyadecha. 2. Ve'al nishmoteinu apkodot lach. Again, 2, for example. Ve'al nisecha shebechol yom imanu. Okay, I'm going to do another 2. ועל נפלאותיך וטובותיך שבכל עת ערב הבוקר וצהריים. That's the number 3. So again, the one da 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 da, or a variation ba da 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 di da da da. Number 2 ti da 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 da. Number 3 ta da 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 ti di da da. Okay, now here that word Holiness is an interesting one. There's a difference in tradition, the Sephardic tradition versus the Ashkenazi tradition. More rather than not really Sephardic versus Ashkenazi, but like the pronunciation, right? So, Tzahoraim is the Sephardic pronunciation. Tzohoraim is the Ashkenazi pronunciation. Okay, so whether we have a kamatz, 2 kamatz katan, tzoho, both have an o sound even though it's a kamatz, or we have a regular kamatz and the second kamatz on the hey, it's a chataf kamatz katan, ho, tzaho. Okay, you cannot go wrong if you do one of them. Okay, just be aware of that and make a conscious decision. Now, come to a kind of dangerous sentence. Hatov kilo chalu rachamecha. And I think I spoke about that in the context of the weekday Nusach. The word is chalu. Don't say chalu, because chalu is to take effect, to actually, right? So if you say hatov kilo chalu rachamecha, that means that your rachamim never existed, never happened. And what you want to do is, this is not what you want to say. You want to say the opposite. Hatov kilo chalu. Chalu from the word klaya or kilayon, i.e., end. Meaning God's mercy never ended. Not never happened, God forbid, but never ended. We're never ending. And then, so this is chalu, as we said, milra, i.e., the accent is on the second syllable. Ve'hamerachem kilo tamu chasadecha. Tamu, here it's very clear, it's got to be on the mil'el, the accent is on the taf. So it's a little bit confusing, because the first one is chalu, and then it's tamu. I think I told you that joke about, it's not a joke, it's a real thing. There's a very famous song written by Ben Zion Schenker, who passed away about 5 years ago. One of the most prolific composers of Jewish music, wrote more than 600 nigunim, mainly for the Modritz Hasidim, but he's the one that wrote, he wrote that, or right, or many others. Anyway, so he wrote a song, Hatov kilo chalu rachamecha, and it goes, Tova tova to kilo chalu rachamecha ve'yamerachem kilo tamu chasadecha me'yayala me'ola givinu la. And I sang in a concert in Tel Aviv a couple of years ago, and it's like every time we sang it this way, the conductor went crazy. He said, absolutely not. The word is chalu, and we had to change. So atova tova to kilo chalu rachamecha ve'yamerachem. Everybody at the audience sang it chalu racham the wrong way. What are you gonna do? So people used to do that with a mistake, that word. So be careful. But without any singing, just a simple nusach for that sentence. Atova kilo chalu rachamecha ve'amrachem kilo tamu chasadecha me'olam kivinu lach. Right? Ta-ra-ra-ra. That's the chatima. That's the end of each paragraph. That's what you're going to do. Okay. Ve'al kulam yitbarach ve'yitromam shimcha malkeinu tamid le'olam va'ed. Okay, that's one. Ve'chol ha'chaim yodu chasela. One. Let's do variation of one. V'halelu et shimcha be'emet. Now two. Ha'el yeshuateinu ve'ezrateinu sela. Baruch atah Adoshem. Hatov shimcha ulchana elehodot. That's a chatima. It's like in Ha'el HaKadosh. Mekadesh HaShabbat. Baruch atah Adoshem. Ta-ra-ra-ra. Tira, pa-pa-pa-ra-ra-ra-ra. That's always the end of a paragraph, definitely end of a bracha. Here you have, in the repetition of the Amidah, you have Birkat Kohanim. At least here in Chutz La'aretz, we don't have Birkat Kohanim by the Kohanim, only on the Regalim, only on the holidays, on Musaf. Rest of the time is going to be by the Chazan. Eloheinu v'Eloi avoteinu barecheinu v'avracha. Now here we come also to an ancient machloket. Hameshuleshet, b'avracha meshuleshet, comma, or b'avracha meshuleshet b'Torah, comma. Spoke about that in the weekday Nusach class. So again, check the Siddur, check whatever makes sense to you. One relates, meaning that the bracha is meshuleshet. The other one that is meshuleshet in the Torah, which is a little bit problematic. But on the other hand, it's whether you say Batorah ktuba l'yedei Moshe avdecha, that the Torah is written by Moshe, or Amshuleshet Batorah, then you say Haktuba l'yedei Moshe avdecha. Haktuba that is written refers to the bracha itself. So it's whether you want to say that it refers to the Torah or the bracha. Okay, it's an ancient machloket. Both are opinions that we can find in among the authorities. We're not going to make the decision here. Just follow your siddur. Okay. Eloheinu v'Elokei Avoteinu barecheinu b'bracha hameshuleshet. If we start scroll, make a psak like that. Batorah ktuba l'yedei Moshe avdecha, amora mipi Aaron u'banav, kohanim amkdoshecha kamur. Yevarechecha. And by the way, that's the way you should read it. Yevarechecha. It's not Yevarechecha. It's in the Yevarech, right? Yevarechecha. Okay, you have like two drops on that. So check it in the Tanakh if you need. Yevarechecha Hashem ve'yishmerecha. Ya'er Hashem panav elecha v'chuneka. Yisar Hashem panav elecha ve'yasem lecha shalom. Again, in Sim Shalom, some people have the practice of singing something, a congregation singing more in Musaf than in Shacharit, but since we're doing Musaf and Shacharit at the same time, just be aware of it. If you're going to do a congregation singing, that's one thing, but we're going to do the simple Nusach. Sim Shalom Tova Ubracha Chen V'Chesed V'Rachamim Aleinu V'Al Kol Yisrael Amecha, or in the sentence, Yisrael Amecha. I'm going to start from the variation this time, just because it changes every time. Barecheinu Avinu, or with two. Barecheinu Avinu. It's your choice, as long as you have, you have those formulas. Ta-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. Variation. Ta-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. Two. T-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. And three. T-da-da-da-da, or ta-da-da-da. That's it. Okay? Barecheinu Avinu, kulanu ke'echad be'or panecha, ki be'or panecha natata lanu, ad Hashem Elokeinu, Torat chayim ve'avat chesed, u'tzedaka u'bracha, ve'rachamim ve'chayim ve'shalom, ve'tov be'einecha, levarech et amcha Yisrael, or levarech et amcha Yisrael, or whatever, any of the formula. As long as you come to the end with number 3. And then the Khatima. Khatima is always the same. Baruch atah Adoshem, atah Adoshem. It's the same thing. Amarech amo Yisrael b'shalom. At the end of every paragraph. Okay, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to ask you to flip right into Musaf. And what we're going to do is in Musaf, we have exactly the same Nusach, right? So the first two brachot are going to be exactly the same as in Shacharit, minus the very end. If you remember, when we did the Shacharit, I don't know, started about 25 minutes ago when I sang that, I said that in Shacharit, we switched to the minor key toward at the end, or in the words Mechayeh Hametim. We switched to the minor key in order to accommodate the Nusach in minor of the Kedusha. Nekadesh et Shemcha ba'olam, etc. So therefore, Baruch atah Adoshem Mechayeh Hametim Nekadesh et Shemcha ba'olam. Yeah, but here I'm going to continue with that, what I call quasi major Nusach, which is basically a Mixolydian Nusach. I don't want to get you confused, and therefore we're going to stay in that Nusach, and therefore Baruch Atah Hashem and here in Na'aritzcha and Kvodo, the first two paragraphs of the Kedusha from Musaf, I'm going to stay in that major Nusach. So many have the practice of singing, perhaps even the entire Kedusha. It is what it is. If you're going to sing, congregation singing, go for it. If you want to do simple Nusach, you can do that as well. If you want a combination, anything goes. Just to prove it to you, that's the major. Okay. Okay. המגישים שמך בקודש, ככתוב על יד נביאך, וקרא זה אל זה ואמר. And the next one, כבודו מלא עולם, you're going to do also in the major. כבודו מלא עולם, משרתיו שואלים זה לזה. And how you go back from that major to the Fragish. It's the Shacharit one. It's the Yishtabach one that we spoke about. You can stay already in that Fragish Nusach. That remember, it's the mode of the Hava Nagila. Even ברחמים, או יפן ברחמים, ויחונם יחדים שמו, ערב הבוקר, בכל יום תמיד, פעמיים בעבר, שמה אומרים. And you stay in that נוסח for the Shema. ואלוהינו אבינו, ומלכנו מושיענו, or you start with the Shema. Shema Yisrael, Ad Hashem Elokeinu, Ad Hashem Echad, Hu Elokeinu, Avinu, Hu Malkeinu, Hu Moshienu, Vehu Yashmeinu Berachamav Sheinit, Leinei Kol Chai, Liot Lachem, Lelokim, Ani Ad Hashem Elokeichem, Divrei Kodeshecha Katuv Leimor. And from here, it's the same. ימלוך על השם לעולם, אלוהי ציון, טה-ra-ra-ra-ra-ra, hallelujah, לדור ודור, just like in שחרית. נגיד גורלך, right? It's the 1, 2, and 3. Pa-ra-ra-ra, di-di-di-da-ra, pa-la-la-la-da-ra-ra-ra, ti-di-ra-ra-ra-ra-ra-ra-ra, ti-di-ra-ra-ra-ra-ra-ra, and the Fatima, pa-ra-ra-ra, di-da-ra-ra. Which is basically the 3. לדור ודור נגיד גורלך, ולנצח נצחים קדושתך נקדיש, בשבחך אלוהינו מפינו לעמוס לא לעבד, כי אל מלך גדול וקדוש אתה, ברוך אתה עד השם, האל הקדוש. The Fatimot are exactly like in Shacharit. Okay, I'm going to go to the middle bracha here. The middle bracha starts with Cantor Shabbat. Guess what? The good news is we stay with the same nusach. We don't leave that nusach. If you want, number 2, and number 3. That's the whole thing. Again, korbenotea. It's not karbanotea. It's kamatz katan. The sound is o on the kuf. Tikanta Shabbat, ratzita korbenoteh, tzivita perushea, im sidurei nesachea. Okay, I'll do 1 and 1. Now I'll do, I guess, 2. Me'angea lo'olam kavod inchalu. Again 2, I guess. To'amei ha'chaim zachu, ve'gam ha'ohavim dvareha. Here's also another common mistake. People say ve'gam ha'ohavim devarea gedula b'chal. Wrong. V'gam ha'ohavim devarea. Those who love its words, gedula b'chal. Gedula, right? Greatness they chose. That's the outcome of loving its words, i.e., its commandments. Okay? וגם האוהבים דבריה גדולה בחרו. אז מסיני נצטוו עליה, that's one. ותצווינו לשם אלוקינו להקריב בה קורבן מוסף שבת כראוי. I did that as one as well. Or, ותצווינו לשם אלוקינו, that was a variation on one. להקריב בה קורבן מוסף שבת כראוי. That was number 3. So you can play with that as much as you want, as long as you put 3 at the end of a paragraph, at the end of a sentence, not in the beginning. יהי רצון לפניך, השם אלוקינו ואלוקי אבותינו, שתעלינו בשמחה לארצנו, ותיטענו בגבולנו. So I did 2 and 2, I'm going to do another 2. ושם נעשה לפניך את קורבנות חובותינו. Now I have to go to the 3 because that's the end of the sentence. תמידים כסדרם ומוספים כהלכתם. 1. Beth, or variation of 1. Beth, מוסף יום השבת הזה. Again 1. נעשה ונקריב לפניך באהבה. כמצוות רצונך. Now you already recognize this number 2. כמו שכתבת עלינו בתורתך. Again number 2. על ידי משה עבדך. That's number 2. Or I'm going to go already to 3. על ידי משה עבדך. מפכבודך כאמור. And this is why, as I said many times before, that the Nusach is something dynamic, something that is improvisational, something that changes every time. Because you have those 1, 2, and 3, and you stick them the way you feel.
Well, how do you decide?
It's whatever you want. There is no right or wrong as long as number 3 is at the end.
And number 1 at the beginning?
No, you can start with number 2. So here, I'm going to go to the next paragraph. So remember, number 1. Number 2. I'm going to start here. וביום השבת שני כבשים בני שנה תמימים. Now I'm going to go to 1. ושני יסרונים סולת מלחבלה ושמן ונזקו. Now I have to go to 3 because that's the end of the paragraph. הולד שבת בשבתו על הולדת תמיד ונזקה.
That's just how you feel in the morning?
Yep.
Influence?
And it changes, actually. It changes from one Shabbat to the other.
No.
Sometimes, like, look, if you're musical and you feel comfortable and all that kind of stuff, sometimes you can even move to a different nusach. And then as long as you know how to come back. I don't want to do that. That's going to be the advanced class. Okay, now we're dealing with basic nusach. Maybe one day we'll do advanced class. Okay, I'm going to the next paragraph. That's 1. That was the variation of 1. And I'm going to go to 2. And now again 2. Number 3. Or I'm going to do the longer version of the 3. Totally up to me.
Now, let me ask you another question.
Yes.
Do you have to finish at a certain time? So if the rabbi or whoever is speaking overgoes and they want you to hurry up, what do you do?
Sometimes, yes. But I want to stay focused on the material here, okay?
Okay.
Okay. Now that paragraph, the closing paragraph of Kedushat Hayom, sanctification of the day, is exactly like in Shacharit. We have the same text, the same paragraph. Remember, I said some people sing it. If you're going to sing it that way, please don't sing, because all the accents are in the wrong way. Okay? And the Khatima is the same thing. We've done it. That's exactly like in Shacharit. Okay, so what happens both in Shacharit and Musaf right after the repetition of the Amidah? And that's actually a rule. We have that every day. What follows a Amidah is a full Kaddish. A full Kaddish, which makes the full Kaddish, is that line Titkabel tzloton uvaot hon, always follows an Amidah. So sometimes there's a delay, like for example, during the week we have Tachanun and we have Kedusha de Sidra, so it's being delayed up till then, which tells you what, in terms of the units of Tefillah, that the Tachanun and the Kedusha de Sidra are expansions of the Amidah, actually, right? If the Kaddish and the full Kaddish relates to the Amidah, but it comes later, that means somehow those sections are an expansions of the Amidah. Okay, so when I say that Titkabel tzloton, what is Titkabel tzloton? Titkabel from the word kibel, to accept the tfilot and the bakashot, tzloton uvaot hon, the tfilot, the prayers and the requests of all the house of Israel. What are the tfilot? What are those prayers and requests of the house of Israel? It's everything that we said in the Amidah. Okay, so it relates to the Amidah. So you know, if you have a repetition, so a full Kaddish always follows the Amidah, even if it's not immediately. Okay, so if I finish the Amidah, the repetition of the Amidah, Baruch atah Hashem, Amarech et amo Yisrael b'shalom. Here the full Kaddish is going to go to a real major Nusach. And if you're not familiar with a major Nusach, pa, 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 it's like, that, when you have, like in the theater, ding, 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 it's time to, the break is over, go back to your seat, or sometimes in the elevator, or that kind of sound, or think of the song Happy Birthday. Da 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 dee, da da da. Pa, 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 pa. That's a major. Happy birthday, dear. Right, that's a major. So you think of that, you always have a major key in your head. And what do you do here? You basically use the major key for that Kaddish, full Kaddish. Yid gadal v'yid kadash shemei Rabba ve'alma divrach chirutei. Happy birthday to ve'alma divrach chirutei. V'yamlich malchutei, v'chayechonu v'yamechonu v'chay dechol beit Yisrael, b'agala v'zman kariv yimru amen. Yitbarach v'yishabar v'yitbar v'yidamam v'yitnaseh, v'yitadar v'yitale v'yitalash v'yishaber v'yichu, v'yelam nikol birchata v'shirata, v'shbechata v'nechmata, amiran v'alma v'yimru amen. Titkabel tzloton uvaoton dechol beit Yisrael, Kadam avon v'ishmaya v'imru amen. Yesh lamarabba min shmaya, v'chayim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Oseh shalom imromav, v'yaseh shalom aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Everybody sing amen.
Amen.
Now, very important that you say v'imru amen. Don't sing the amen with them, because that's what we call amen yetoma. That means they say amen after you tell them v'imru amen. Say amen. They respond amen. If you're going to say and they say amen, it makes no sense. And say what? Spaceship? You got to tell them, say amen, and then they say amen. Okay? So be careful with that. And there's like basically, as long as you're in a major key, you're good with that Kaddish, you can do it any way that you want. I mentioned that before, and with that, I kind of want to finish. The Nusach flows from one unit to the other. So we have the major here, and that leads us already to the Nusach of taking out the Torah. Sulzer was a very famous Chazan and wrote parts over the Nusach. He was a Chazan in Vienna. Composed that Ein kamocha ba'Elohim Adonam, en kemasecha malchut. Right, that we sing, that's in major, that flows together with the full Kaddish. Adoshem melech, Adoshem malach. It's a choral piece. Adoshem yimloch le'olam va'ed. Adoshem oz le'amo yiten. Adoshem yevarech et amo b'shalom. Now here, what happens is most places we sing Avarachamim, that was written actually by Novakovsky and not by Sulzer. Sulzer wrote Avarachamim. Some congregations still use that today. Avarachamim etiva v'ratzon cha'etzion. Most places would use the Novakovsky one, which was originally written for Rosh Hashanah, but it was so popular that people started using that on Shabbat. But that's basically congregation singing. Okay. In Hasidic shtivels, for example, they don't do any of that stuff. Okay, because that's kind of what we call the Zulzer style of tefillah. And Vayhi ben Aaron, Vayomer Moshe, that's Zulzer. Okay, so that's Zulzer. And then also those 3 lines when we hold the Torah. Shema Yisrael Adoshem Elokeinu Adoshem Echad. If the Orthodox rabbis today knew that Zulzer actually wrote that piece, Shema Yisrael, for a co-ed choir, an organ, they would never use it in the synagogues today. But that's the reality. Shema Yisrael Adoshem Elokeinu Adoshem Echad Echad Elokeinu Gadol Adonenu Kadosh Shemo Gadol Adoshem Iti Oneromema Shema. Be careful, it's not. And that's what I hear usually. People say, that makes no sense. Will exalt Shmo Yachdav, together his name, it makes no sense. And exalt his name. How are we going to do that? Together. All of us together. Okay, and then everybody sing. Which is the Sulzer one. And that's it. That's basically Shacharit and vast majority of Musaf. In Musaf, I just want to finish up over there. After the full Kaddish, I'm going to flip very quickly, right? We have Enkelokeinu. Vast majority of the places going to sing that as congregation singing, whether it's the German drinking song, it's a beer. Well, they used to drink beer in the German, or any of the other melodies, do whatever you want. Basically, there's nothing there in terms of the Nusach. A lot of places they sing, which is a camp melody from the 60s here in America. It's something that came from the music of the youth movements from the camps here in the 60s in America. And that's it. That's the all that stuff. So what we need to cover next time, we're going to do a little bit of the beginning of Musaf, which is technically Shacharit, but the prayer for the state, all that kind of stuff, returning the Torah. That stuff we're going to do next week. Then we're going to delve into the Friday night Musaf. We're going to do Kabbalat Shabbat and the Mariv, which are 2 different Nuschaot. Okay? So next week, next Wednesday, same time, the same place. And welcome Greg and Mr. Abrams. And any questions before